Hi, this is your host, Andrew Raffel, the founder and CEO of Baintree Wealth Advisors. And I want to welcome you to the Your Wealth and Beyond podcast, a show that was created to help you simplify the financial world and to ensure that you're living your best life now and in retirement. Each show, we're going to be bringing on experts that are going to help you build wealth and, most importantly, find purpose in what matters most. Welcome back to another episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. And today's show, I'm super excited to introduce you to somebody that we've been following for a number of years. He's looked on as the go-to expert for optimizing Social Security benefits, and he's written the go-to book called Get What's Yours, How to Maximize Your Social Security Benefits. Yes, I had the privilege to speak with Larry Kotlikoff, who is a professor at Boston University, the founder and president of Maximize My Social Security Software, and really the one expert that I look at on a daily basis to help make sure that each and every one of our clients maximize one of the most important assets that each of us have, which is Social Security. There's so much misinformation out there, and it's such an important asset to build in to ensure that you don't outlive not just your money, but your lifestyle. So today we're going to learn about why being patient is very important, understanding the different timing aspects of your benefit, and a lot of the nuances that most of you out there are questioning, and we're going to help you decipher through. After today's show, you're going to have the ability for us to run a customized report to help you on your way, to help you maximize your benefit. So without further ado, my episode with Larry Kotlikoff on how to optimize your Social Security benefit. And welcome back, everybody, to a brand new episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. And today, audience, listeners, I am super excited and honored to have someone that I've been following and learning from all of these years to help you, each of you, get what's yours in regards to one of the biggest assets that are out there for each of us, Social Security. So, Larry Kotlikoff, welcome to the Your Wealth and Beyond podcast. How are you today?
Very good. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be with you.
And I know today, Larry, we could talk in regards to the economy and taxes and the deficit and Corona. But today we're going to dig into a topic that I find very sexy, and that is Social Security and ways and tips and strategies and how to optimize your benefits. So, Larry, before we jump in, you have been looked on from our industry as one of the gurus of trying to help educate those out there on Social Security. So, what led you down this path years ago to learn the ins and outs of social, and then ultimately to write the book, Get What's Yours, The Secrets to Maxing Out Social Security?
Well, so I'm a professor of economics at Boston University, as I guess everybody now knows. And I worked on Social Security's impact on the economy in graduate school for my thesis, my PhD thesis in economics. So I got interested early on in kind of the big macro picture about Social Security. But in order to understand that, you need to really delve into some of the details. And so over the years, I was writing different papers, often about Social Security and the economy and keeping an eye on its finances. And then I decided at some point to develop financial planning software. Well, not at some point, it was like 1993. And I started a company, and we developed a program called Maxify Planner. And we also have a Social Security standalone program called Maximize My Social Security. Anyway, in order to develop these programs, I really had to get into the details of Social Security in a very serious way. And then I realized that my academic knowledge was just really surface, and then I didn't really know much at all about Social Security. So I couldn't really tell the software engineers what to do without really studying it very carefully. And so for years, I was on the phone every other day, it seemed, with the actuaries at Social Security trying to understand the actual provisions of this incredibly complicated system. And it has 2,728 rules in its handbook and has hundreds of thousands of rules about those 2,728 rules in its program operating manual system. So after a couple of years of this, I really felt I understood things a whole lot better, and we got that into our software. And then through time, we've just continued to improve our understanding and improve the software because it's very, very complicated. And we're still to this day, 27 years later, finding small little parts of Social Security's provisions that we didn't have 100% correct. So it's really hopeless for a typical household to figure this stuff out on their own. So that's why you need somebody to say what's going on, what are these provisions really telling you to do, and you need to have smart software to help in very complicated cases figure out what's best.
Yeah, and I know CPAs may beg to differ, but the Social Security system, the rules, seems like it's more complicated than the tax code.
Well, we have one way to measure that. So we have this Maxify planner software that's full financial planning. It has code for the federal income tax, and it has code for the Social Security system. The code for the Social Security system is significantly longer. In other words, the lines of software code that have been written to get Social Security right are longer than the lines of code that we had to write to get the federal income tax right. So I think in that context, you can say that Social Security is more complicated than the personal federal income tax.
And why we're so passionate about optimizing Social Security, as really the 401k came about in the late 70s, early 80s. What we've seen, and most of you listeners, most of individuals now don't have pensions, right, Larry? So ultimately, 30 years ago, 80% would have a pension. Using that along with Social Security, they had this nice guaranteed income stream. So without that, the individual is at the risk of having to invest on their own. So the key component of having Social Security and some of the benefits that can have the continued income stream, the cost of living adjustments, which we'll jump into. For individuals, Larry, you deal with this on a daily basis. Some of the biggest mistakes we see is just people making rash decisions, not looking at all of the options and the strategies that are available. So why do you think that most individuals will rush and say, hey, I want what's mine now. I got to get what's mine now, and not have that patience of waiting and understanding how it fits in with all their other assets and how it fits in with longevity and things of that nature?
Right. And just as background to your question, if you're patient and you wait till 70 to collect your retirement benefit, it's going to be more than 70% higher in inflation adjusted dollars than if you take the Social Security benefit at age 62. So waiting till 70 gives you this enormous payoff. Yes, you give up 8 years of benefits, but then you get this check every month that's 70% or more, could be up to 73 or 4% for some people, higher than it would otherwise have been. So your question is, why do people kind of jump to take their benefit really as soon as they retire? I think only about 2% of the households wait till 70. So almost everybody is taking the benefit by the point they reach full retirement age, which is still 66 right now. But, you probably have 30, 40% people taking it before 60, at 65 or before 65. So what's going on there? Well, I think people are worried that they're going to lose the benefit if they die. So, and this is something that Social Security has actually reinforced, this completely screwed up notion that you're going to be in worse shape that if you die having not taken your benefit. So you walk into maybe the office at 62, you ask the people there what you should do, and they're not supposed to give you advice, but they say, well, look, better play it safe because, if you don't take your benefit and you die, let's say next 2 years from now, you will have gotten nothing for all those years of contributions. You'll have lost the money. Well, that's a really screwed up way of thinking, because if you die 2 years from now, you'll be in heaven and you won't need any Social Security benefits. You're going to be in heaven, and by definition, heaven's heavenly, and you'll have all the money you need and everything else you need, probably in whatever currency you like. So the real concern you have when you're 62 is not dying early and kicking yourself in heaven for not having taken your benefit. The real concern is living to 100 and living on cat food. So we're concerned at a personal level with our own physical longevity, and we're very nervous about dying early. But from a financial perspective, dying early, dying young is a terrific thing because the bills stop. The real danger, financially speaking, is dying late, living to 98 like my mom did. We're going to have 3 million people in about 30 years who are over 100. The number of centenarians, people over 100, is going to be around 3 million in the middle of the century. So The age group that's growing most rapidly are people over 100, actually, right now in the country. So we have to be very concerned about making it for a very long time. We can't ignore our future selves and just be selfish and say, well, my future self will take care of him or herself. That's not the case.
Yeah, I think one of your videos, you make a great point in just this reframing of it. And this is as advisors, we try to, reframe it for the clients. And it's not about, hey, I'm going to lose out on my benefits if I don't take it early. But it's what about the possible gains that you'll have if you delay? So reframing that psychology of it helps them to understand that short term, hey, I want it now versus wait a little bit, and that long term benefit. And that's something that as planners, it's hard to just explain it to them. And that's why we need the software and those type of things that can allow them to visualize it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see, at least in our software, what your living standard is if you take it early, your sustainable living standard, how much you can get to spend every year right through age 100. If you take it early, let's say you think about taking your Social Security early and your 401k money later, maybe starting at 72, that's the age at which you have to at least take minimum distributions these days, versus taking your retirement account money early and taking Social Security starting at 70. You can see from our software in 2 seconds that your living standard is going to be dramatically higher if you reverse it. If you take Social Security second, your retirement account money earlier. And that's something that a lot of people today, with this COVID plague that's led to so many people losing their jobs, if you're in your early 60s and you have lost your job, you might be tempted to take Social Security right away rather than cash into your retirement account money. But there's no guarantee the stock market is going to continue to do well. It fell like 32% this year before it went back up. The value is probably up about 20, 25% from where it dropped. So, and I think it's just going to fall again another 50%. I think it's going to end up below half of where it was at its peak, personally. So I'd be very wary of being in the stock market. I'm certainly personally out of the stock market. So to take a gamble, to in effect take Social Security early in order to play the market when you've lost your job, that's like double jeopardy. You've already lost a good part of your security blanket from losing your job, and now you're going to double down and risk Social Security. Well, risk taking a lower Social Security benefit for the rest of your life in order to get a shot at more money on the market. That's not a good idea.
Right.
Just one other quick thing I'll say is that if people have taken their Social Security benefit before full retirement age, they do have the option, and they're still before full retirement age or even before age 70, they do have the option to suspend their benefit and start it up again at age 70 at a higher level. It's 8% a year for every year that you suspend. So you can try and recoup a higher benefit if you have started early. If you're still below age 70, there's still an option to undo some of the damage.
And a lot of times when we're sitting with a new client, they've taken Social Security before their full retirement age, and it's within that 1 year, and we map out a game plan for income and showing them the potential benefit of delaying. As long as they're within that 1 year, they have that ability to still do the one-time do-over. So listeners, what that means is that you can actually pay back all your benefits, withdraw it, and then it's like it never happened. So we've done that, multiple times when somebody's come in and ultimately, made a decision that they were looking at saying, hey, I may regret this. So you do have that option before that magic age of your full retirement.
Yeah, well, you have an option, even if you started your benefit I think at any age you start, you might even be 67 and you start your benefit. Within the year, you can withdraw the benefit by paying back what you received, just as you said. But then this other thing I was talking about is suspending your benefit, which is, suppose I took my benefit at 62. I've now reached full retirement age. It's, let's say, 66 and some number of months. And here I am. Do I have any options? Well, I could withdraw my benefit, but then I have to pay back basically 4 years of benefits, which is a large amount of money, and start from scratch. But another thing you could do is just suspend your benefit, which is different from withdrawing your benefit. It's called suspension, and you'll then get delayed retirement credits, which amount to 8% a year. So you'll have this benefit that you took at 62, and it was reduced because you took it early. So you're going to have your early retirement benefit, but you're going to be able to raise it 8% a year for 4 years between 66 and 70 by suspending it and then starting it at
Yep.
70.
And that's that magic age of knowing when your full retirement is. And for most of your listeners, it's between 66 and 67. And I know it's probably not ideal, but once you hit full retirement, is there any limit on how many times you can start and suspend your benefit?
You can certainly do it at least twice. I don't know that there is any real limit. You might, for example, you might have started your benefit, and now because were laid off, and then a job comes in, and then you suspend it, and then you get, you work for a year or so, you get laid off again, you take your benefit, and then you get another job, suspend it again. So I'm not sure people would want to, need to suspend it more than twice, but of course, people's cash flow comes into play here. So I've been talking as if your listeners have enough resources, either in the form of a 401k or some other assets, to get by until age 70 and start taking their retirement benefit at that point. And by the way, it's not always, even if you're not cash constrained, it's not always optimal to wait till 70. If you have, for example, a disabled child, you may want to take your benefit early in order to get that disabled child benefit, Social Security benefit rolling. You need to be collecting your retirement benefit for your child to collect on your account, or to get a spouse who doesn't have a significant earnings record, who's waiting to collect a spousal benefit on your account. So there are reasons to take benefits before 70, your retirement benefits. But if you don't have the wherewithal to wait till 70, then you're kind of in a jam. You really have to take your benefit early, or maybe you can borrow on your house or get some relative to lend you some money, friend, because the return on this thing is absolutely certain and it's enormously high. So if you can borrow at a decent rate from a brother or sister or a child and get by for a few years, then you'll have the wherewithal from the higher Social Security check to repay the loan.
Yep. And if we try to have a client visualize, an income producing asset, take away the name Social Security and indicate if you have something that's going to continue to grow 8% a year up until age 70. When you get the income, you get a cost of living adjustment, which we'll talk about, which is very important with regard to keeping up with inflation. When you do take it out, it's taxed differently than your retirement accounts, where some of the worst case scenario, only up to 85% of it's taxable. And then upon passing, it's a potential asset or income producing asset that will go to your spouse. So it's a longevity play, not just for you, but for your spouse. So when you take it in that context, they look and say, oh yeah, you're right. This is a pretty good asset to think about. And it's, again, just reframing it.
What you just said about if you have a lower spouse who's has a lower earnings history than yours, when you pass away, if you wait till 70, that spouse will get a higher, what's called excess widow's benefit or widower benefit, depending whether it's the spouse is male or female, based on the fact that you're getting a higher retirement benefit. So they'll get their own retirement benefit plus the difference between your check and their check. So in effect, they'll get your entire check. And if you wait till 70, they'll get a bigger check as a widower than if you take your money at your Social Security at 68 or 66 or 62, for sure. So absolutely, there's a payoff to you in terms of your own benefit, but then there's also a payoff to a lower earning spouse and also to children that you might have. You might have young children or disabled children. They also get, actually, the survivor benefit for kids is not connected to the disabled child benefit is connected to your full retirement benefit, not to your actual benefit.
But if you are married and you have a spouse that's significantly younger and you have younger children, one thing, listeners, to really make sure you understand the rules with when your benefit is turned on, how there may be a potential benefit for the younger children, and potentially if the spouse isn't working, they got to look at the earnings limit there. But there's a way to potentially maximize your benefit, and that may mean taking it a little bit earlier than 70 when you play with all those numbers there. So again, that's not for everybody. That we could dig in for a whole show just on that. Again, make sure that when you're looking at your situation, that you're speaking with somebody that understands this. And that's, I think, Larry, part of the issue is most even advisors don't really spend the time to know, to research, to understand how to properly use Social Security for their clients. And we just look at it as, it's a huge asset if we think about it. We paid into it, but then the average two earner couple, if they turn it on in their mid 60s and live to their 90s, I mean, we're talking 6, 7, 800, if not millions of dollars. And if you make a wrong decision, as you like to say, you're leaving tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table.
Yeah, and that translates into, if you have the liquidity, waiting just means you're going to have you can spend more right now because you're going to have more money coming in later. So, but if you take your Social Security early, now you're on a lifetime basis worse off, and therefore your annual spending has to be lower. So there's no real sacrifice necessarily occurring here by being patient.
Now on the spousal benefit, so this is one where there's a lot of confusion in regards to how it ultimately works, and again, a lot of nuances, a lot of rules. But where a lot of times what we'll try to do, especially now that the rules have changed, and as you know, we a few years ago could be a lot more creative with filing, suspending, and taking advantage of what the laws were at that time. Some say loopholes, we say these were the laws, but that's changed. So there's a new norm now. But in the scope of spousal benefits, one of the areas that we see a lot of time money left on the table is if you've got the higher earning spouse that's going to wait till 70, and the spouse that earned less, maybe he or she took their benefit a little bit early, their own benefit, there may be the potential that when the higher earner files, that the spouse may be able to get a little bit of a jump up with that excess spousal benefit. Is that correct in my assumption there?
Well, yeah, let's say you have a spouse who has a low earnings record. They can't collect a spousal benefit based on your record until you actually start collecting your own retirement benefit. So that was kind of one of the cases I was talking about, that where it might behoove you to take your retirement benefit earlier than 70, because there's a trade-off. If you wait till 70, your own benefit is higher, but it's going to take longer for your wife or husband is going to have to wait that much longer to start getting this spousal benefit, excess spousal benefit based on your record. So that's where very careful software can help you decide exactly what's best in terms of your lifetime benefit. So our software in those cases might say, well, the husband, if he's the higher earner, should take, and let's say he's older, he should take his benefit at 68. And the wife should start taking her retirement maybe when she's 68. She's reached full retirement age, and so she collects on her own retirement benefit with no reduction, and then she collects this excess spousal benefit that's also not reduced. And she can do it because he started to collect his retirement benefit, or she can collect her own retirement benefit for a few years, maybe starting at 64. And when he's 68 and she's 60, full retirement age, then she collects this extra piece, which is the excess spousal benefit. So it is complicated.
And the thing is, in that example you just gave us, the Social Security Department, they're not going to send you a letter saying, hey, now you qualify for a little bit more because you hit full retirement age. So that's the important caveat there, is that you got to know what your rights are. And then when that happens, then you actually have to go in and you have to ask for it. And this is where I think millions and millions of dollars are left on the table in just this one aspect of being able to potentially jump up to get a higher benefit, even if you took it early, once you hit full retirement, because of that excess spousal. And it may only be $50 more a month, but that's real money. And then you tie that into the inflation side of it. But the Social Security Department isn't going to knock on your door and give you a check.
Right. The Social Security Administration is not our friend. They're going to encourage us to take benefits at the wrong ages. They're not going to tell us about all the benefits to which we're eligible. They don't have the right software to figure out what's the right strategy for a couple. I'll give you an example of where they've engaged in complete malfeasance, and even their inspector general has written up a report talking about this, and the Social Security Administration has done nothing about it. But they've, over the years, they either induce people who are widows or widowers to take their retirement benefit and their widow's benefit at the same time, or they did it just automatically for the people. And consequently, they deprived a lot of people from the option, which a widower or widower has, of taking your widow benefit, your survivor benefit first, let's say starting at age 60, and waiting till 70 to take your retirement benefit at a much higher level. So suppose that your spouse has died, you come to age 60, you just turned age 60, and your widow's benefit is maybe you're the higher earner, is let's say $1,000, maybe $1,500 a year. And well, actually, let me make the example this that you're 62. So you come to age 62, and you can take your own retirement benefit starting at 62. But now your spouse just died, so you're 62. You go into Social Security, and they sign you up for both benefits. And let's say both benefits were both about $1,500. Well, now you're going to get $1,500 for the rest of your life, adjusted for inflation. But had you just taken your widow's benefit, you get $1,500 a month right up through age 70. But then at age 70, you'd be getting your retirement benefit, which would be the $1,500 times basically 1.7, 70% more, due to the fact that it was not reduced because you didn't take it early, and because of the delayed retirement credits that you would get on that retirement benefit between full retirement age and 70. So this can amount to literally $100,000 in present value that Social Security's clerks or staff, just by either purposefully or unintentionally or maliciously, having you apply for both benefits at once, they've deprived thousands of people, widows and widowers, of tons of money over the years, and they've done nothing to correct this. They've done nothing to go back and say, well, we should not have allowed you to sign up, or we should not have signed you up for two benefits at the same time, because you only could get the larger of the two benefits. And so if the widow's benefit was like $1,500 and the retirement benefit was $1,499, you're just going to get the widow's benefit your whole life. Whereas had you not taken or been forced to take the Social Security benefit, retirement benefit, you would have started at 70 at getting that $1,499 times 1.7. So this is one place where, again, smart software can keep you safe from yourself and from Social Security.
Yep, it's that 7-letter word deeming, which listeners we won't get into, but it's just by saying that wrong, one or two wrong words. And on that note, Larry, I mean, there's been multiple times over the last decade that I've actually, we've gone through the plan using the software, and we said, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to say. And I'll say, if anything goes wrong, call me. And I've had situations where they're in the office, Social Security office, and they're telling them they can't do something that they can do. I've actually literally had to get on the phone with the Social Security person, and they had to get a manager. And we had to explain to them that this is the rule. And it's just something that individuals that are out there, they, like you said, don't take the advice of Social Security. It's almost like that reverse psychology that they're going to push you into it. But just know your rights, know what the rules are in many situations, especially with survivor benefits. You think about if an individual loses their spouse, they're already dealing with the emotion of that, and then they just jump in and they end up deeming and taking both benefits. So just know what the rights are, and sometimes it's taking your benefit early and then jumping onto the survivor benefit later at full retirement, or vice versa. Many times for our clients, it's let's get the survivor benefit a little bit early, get it at a discounted amount, reduced amount, and then grow theirs to age 70. I mean, usually the software will show that it's going to be, tens of thousands of dollars more in their pocket if they live a long life.
Yeah, I've also had experiences talking to staff from Social Security. Somebody using our software goes to Social Security 4 times, and calls them up, and they keep being told they can't do something they can do. And in one case, they went into the office. I said, look, when you get to the office, put the lady or man from Social Security on the phone, call me and have them talk to me. So this happened once, and the lady at Social Security started yelling at me, and she went on for about a half an hour and said, and I said, well, at the end of this, because I could not get a word in edgewise, I said, please, let me just make sure I understand what your name is and what office you're working at, because I write columns for Forbes. And I'm going to just make sure I include all this information in the column I'm about to write. It's going to be posted in about half an hour, indicating you got this completely 100% wrong. But it's good talking to you. And she more or less slammed down the phone. And then 5 minutes later, she said she went to talk to her manager, and I was right, and called back to apologize. And I didn't write the column for Forbes. That's the arrogance. And the staff are not well paid. They're overworked, undertrained, and that's what you get when you don't treat people well and you push them too hard. It's far too complicated for the staff, and they don't have the proper software at their disposal. to figure out they're not supposed to give anybody advice, but to give people the wrong answer, the wrong advice, or say you can't get this benefit that you're due.
Can't imagine somebody yelling at you. You seem very amicable. So it must have been somebody must have been having a very bad day. It's over there. So let's touch on, you mentioned it earlier, and this is another huge benefit of waiting, is this cost of living adjustment that, and again, there's no guarantees that it's going to be there in the future, but, from, looking backwards at, averages between 2 and 3% a year. But, how does that help somebody, if they can get their benefit to the highest amount, that cost of living adjustment that can help them keep up with inflation? Where have you seen that as a benefit, and where do you see that as a long term of helping somebody make sure they don't outlive their money or their lifestyle?
Well, I think it's really important to have this security blanket in real terms and inflation adjusted terms in your this income, the secure inflation protected income coming into your bank account every month, because the Federal Reserve right now is pumping huge amounts of money into the economy. I'm just, literally, you can think about this as just the government printing green pieces of paper, dollar bills, that they're just flooding the market with right now. We've had over a 50%, probably a 60, 70% increase in the money supply, and the amount of piece of green dollar bills floating around in this economy just over the last year because of the way the Fed has intervened in this crisis. Now, eventually that's likely to lead to inflation. We've had countries experience both depressions and inflations at the same time. You can look at the Weimar Republic and look at Venezuela today, look at Zimbabwe. There's countries that get into really bad trouble economically, and the government starts printing money. Argentina, they have hyperinflation at the same time they have a crappy economy, lots of unemployment. So I think we have to worry about inflation taking off. Most people can't remember inflation because they're too young. But in the 70s, we had inflation rates, even if, I guess it got up to about 10% for a couple of years. And the 10%, if your Social Security check was, let's say, $2,000, but it was just dollars, it would be eroded by 10% every year. If the inflation was 10% a year for 10 years, that's going to cut your benefit dramatically in real terms. It's going to water down the payment that you get. So that's not the case, fortunately, because Social Security is indexed to inflation, and therefore it's protected. The other thing you kind of referenced was the fact that Social Security is fiscally broke. It's in very bad long-term shape, and the benefit might be cut in the future. They might cut benefits, but I've done simulations with our software, because our software allows you to specify, hey, my benefit's going to be cut by X percent starting in this year in the future. And it's the gain from being patient is so large that even if the benefits are cut significantly, it's still better to wait, to be patient. But again, one can run this in the software and see for yourself what I'm saying.
Yeah, you look back to the late 70s, early 80s stagflation. So I know there's probably not a lot of Gen Zs that are listening to today's show, but those of you that are out there that are getting close to retirement or are retired, I mean, you think about your mortgages that you had back in those times. You think about CD rates. And in 1980, the cost of living adjustment for Social Security was 14.3%. Now, like you said, Larry, it doesn't mean you had more money in your pocket. It just helped to make sure that you could maintain the cost of living daily. And so that's the power. Obviously, these last 10, 12 years since the Great Recession, it's been pretty muted. But at some point, we're going to have to pay for this stimulus, this just recent $2 to $3 trillion. It's I have a 14-year-old daughter, Larry. I'm afraid for her and her generation, just here, kick the can down the road. So we can't guarantee anything. And that is, you brought up a good point. Like a lot of people will think, and I'm going to take it early because it's not going to be there for me, or the system's flawed. And that's something that we can't guarantee where it will be, but there's things that they can do. Yeah, they could change the cost of living. They could keep increasing, and I feel that they will, the full retirement age. So for my daughter, it may be 72. Then the taxes, right now, I think it's about 135, 140,000 that you pay on Social Security. So if they keep increasing that, or increase it like Medicare, where you pay it on the full amount, these are all ways in how they can keep the system going. But we can't live in fear right now.
Yeah, I mean, we are imposing huge bankrupting burdens on our children because we have a fiscal system that's not sustainable. I could scare people very seriously if we really got into this discussion because The official government debt, which is likely to end up at around 110% of GDP from about 70% of GDP, where it was maybe 5 years ago. Not maybe, it was about 70% of GDP when President Obama left office. It'll probably be, it's not going to be as high as Italy, but going from 70% to 110% of GDP just on your official debt, that's huge. But then if you look at the other unfunded liabilities of our system, Social Security's $53 trillion unfunded liability. The Medicare and Medicaid programs have huge uncovered liabilities out there. So our whole, putting everything together, we have an enormous fiscal gap that we're just leaving, dumping into the laps of our children without any even discussion, public discussion by either party of what's going on. In other countries, they have adults running the show. I was in a cab in New Zealand. I went to New Zealand a few years back and to give a lecture, some lectures at the Bank of New Zealand. I'm in the taxi cab going from the airport to the bank. I started hearing this commentator say how terrible it was that their trust fund for their longevity, their Social Security system, had what amounted to a really minor deficit. And that was a big issue of debate. People were very upset. Well, our system is basically a third underwater, our Social Security system, in the sense that you have to raise taxes by 1/3 permanently starting today to pay for all the benefits that are projected, or you have to cut all benefits starting immediately by about a quarter. So that gives you an idea of the degree to which our system is in bad shape. But I don't see benefit cuts as what's going to happen. I think we'll have tax increases eventually, or very high inflation. I don't know. The whole thing looks like a train wreck, so it's hard to say. But I think Social Security is going to be the last thing that will be cut because politically it's so difficult. You have older people that are getting these benefits that are so dependent on it, the benefit, and they also vote. When it comes to election day, they have nothing better to do than to vote. They're not working. So it's very hard for politicians to cut that benefit.
Yep. And in times like this, where the market's so volatile, having that steady income, especially if you don't have a pension, was a lifesaver for a lot of people. So one more area I want to touch on before we end is, and again, the column that you mentioned. This will all be in the show notes. It's almost, I think, religiously that you update it. And it's great, listeners, because it's the questions that we can't dig into today, the specific questions. And, that's where these 2,700 rules and all of these things, where Larry will go in and have a situation and be able to spell it out. So, I think you've been doing that, and then back in the PBS days, and then inside your Maximize My Social Security. So there's just a plethora of situations that Larry hits upon that is going to be, somehow it's going to be beneficial for you. But as much as I'm a romantic, I know that 50% of marriages end in divorces. And so for divorces, that a lot of rules and stipulations, but what are some of the mistakes that you see, or the questions that you get for those that have been married and are now divorced, and knowing what their benefits and their rights are, both while this ex is living, if the ex gets remarried, and then, ultimately where we see a lot of people not knowing is if their ex dies, do they qualify for a higher benefit? And a lot of times the answer is yes.
Yeah. You have to keep track of what whether your ex is still alive. And certainly if it's a higher earning ex and you were married for 10 or more years to that person, you want to be very cognizant of whether they're alive or dead, because you may have a lot of benefits coming your way. If they died after, your benefit is going to be based on their full retirement benefit. So you want to understand what's happened with them for sure. And you also may be eligible for a divorce spousal benefit. So those are two important benefits that you want to keep track of. No question about it.
Yeah, we had an example, just so listeners, so we had a client of mine who was divorced. She was a stay-at-home mom, so she didn't have any earnings for Social Security to base the 35 years off of. So when she hit full retirement, even though she was not married, they were married longer than 10 years, she was able to get half his benefit, which was, Larry, about like $1,200 or something of that nature. And the ex had waited till 70 to collect his. So he ultimately, when he passed away, she was not married again. So she was able, because like you said, she kept tabs on him. She was able then to go and collect in the sense of the survivor benefit for the ex-spouse. So she then jumped up to what his retirement benefit was, which was, as you can imagine, Larry, a huge increase for her. And it's a game changer for her. And this, listeners, it didn't matter that he was already remarried. That had nothing to do with it. So all these rules, doesn't matter if your ex is married or not, there are certain rules. So you just have to know what those are. And like we said earlier, you're not going to just magically get a check in the mail for that increase. You have to let Social Security know. You have to prove you were married for that period of time. So you just have to know what the rights are. And that's where you got to work with an advisor. You have to know the software. You have to work with somebody that can help lead you to the right answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the rules are different for, as you're indicating, for divorcee spouse benefits versus divorcee survivor benefits. And, you have to be 60 to get benefits when you're ex. If you're remarried, you have to wait till you're 60 to remarry. So you don't want to be remarrying at 59 because that could cost you benefits. And by the way, if you do remarry after 60 and you're collecting on, let's say, your current husband's account, and then your ex dies, you can start collecting on the ex's account. And then if your current husband dies, you can start collecting a widow's benefit on that husband's account. So there's basically two independent benefits that you can collect, the larger of the two, depending on which is the larger. You need to understand everything about your ex's situation, whether he's alive, and ultimately what his earnings history was, and also about your current spouse's situation. Also, don't get remarried too early, or if you do get remarried before age 60, understand what you might be giving up in terms of benefits from the ex.
My at workshops, I had somebody ask this question. They had been married 3 times, and 4 years, 3 years, and 3 years. And she asked if she could add them all together and be able to use that 10-year rule. And of course, that's not the case. It's got to be 10 years to the same person. So that's a very important component. And also for some that are partners that have been together forever, we have sometimes they just never tied the knot. For some, it makes sense to actually get married for monetary reasons, and some of that's down to beyond IRAs and situations where they can roll over to their own, but Social Security could potentially provide them a much higher benefit if they're married. Not to say you should get married just for the money reasons, but sometimes you should.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now that we have gay marriage rights, very important for gay couples to think through whether or not they should get married, because there may be a big Social Security incentive to doing that. Because if only for the survivor benefit, you've got 2 spouses, and the lower earning spouse may be dependent on the higher earning. Well, two people, and the lower earning person may be dependent on the higher earning person's Social Security check, and then that person dies. Well, if they had been married for 9 months, the lower earning person would be receiving the decedent's check starting right away. So this is a very important form of life insurance that one spouse can provide to the other spouse, and one person can provide the other person through getting married.
100%. And you and I could probably spend another 3 hours digging in. So listeners, this is just kind of tip of the iceberg. In the show notes, there'll be links to not just the Forbes articles that you write and the question answers, a link to the Get What Yours. And Larry, I use that book, and all my advisors do, and we use it. We bring it to workshops, and even though some of it is outdated, I'll always pour back in there and find something. And I appreciate everything that you do on this end. I know you do a lot of things with the economy and the work that you're doing on many other levels. But this is great, and listeners, really the 3 rules the book breaks down, just so as we've touched on, as Larry, you indicate, and this is kind of the magic formula: be patient, get all what's yours, and get the timing right. Easier said than done, but have the right guidance, right?
Absolutely, yeah. This is too big a deal to kind of do this on your own. You really need to have expert advice, double, triple checking that you've got it 100% correct.
Yeah, and it's just, and listeners, just one piece of the retirement puzzle. It's a huge piece, but if you do have other assets to help bridge the gap, it's just coordinating it. It's working with a trusted team. It's understanding taxes, where we are right now in this low tax environment, where taxes are going to be in the future. I think, Larry, you and I both can agree that taxes are going to be higher. So potentially, utilizing all of those assets in today's terms, maximizing what a benefit could be like in Social Security. And that can position you to weather lots of storms, especially the risk of living long, right? There's a risk of living long, and that's where Social Security can be a big piece. So Larry, thank you so much for joining us. Listeners, there'll also be a link to the Maximize My Social Security website. And for each of you out there that are listening to the show, you'll be able to reach out to us, and we'll be able to run a high level of a strategy for you to make sure that you're maximizing or optimizing your benefits. So we're here for you. Education is power. Probably within 15 minutes, we can at least guide you to see if you're on the right track. And Larry, continue doing what you're doing because we need it out there. Individuals need it.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful.
Thanks again. It was a great interaction.
Awesome. Thanks, Larry. And listeners, stay tuned for a brand new episode of Your Wealth and Beyond later this month. Happy planning, everybody, and stay healthy. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. To get access to all the resources mentioned during today's podcast, please visit Vaintree.com/podcast. And be sure to tune in later this month for another episode of Your Wealth and Beyond.
Investment advice is offered through Vaintree Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Insurance and annuity products are offered separately through Vaintree Planning Group, LLC. Vaintree is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute legal or tax advice. You should talk to a qualified professional before making any decisions about your personal situation.